Hi, folks. Welcome. We'll go ahead and get started here. So I've been staying these last few days at a wonderful family spot here, and I'm by a incredible, beautiful body of water known as the Pacific Ocean. And probably some combination of being by the water these last few days and just my own uh, semi-obsession with the ocean and wave metaphor. um, I was prompted to write something. It actually came out of a conversation I was having with a family member, a couple of family members trying to, they were talking about different kind of issues that they're dealing with in their life, sort of anxieties and fears and lacking of relationship. And I'm just like listening in on the conversation. And then I decided to chime in and offer a little different perspective. And I felt like I was kind of fumbling around trying to find a way to convey something that's not that easy to convey. And about this very radically different perspective on the nature of experience and phenomena. And I ended up feeling, as I think as a result of feeling like I didn't do a very good job talking about it, I wrote them a letter and turned it into a blog post, or I'm going to turn it into a blog post. But I wanted to read it to you because it encapsulates really what these meetings are about and what the perspective I'm trying to highlight. And it is, as I often say, it is not the only way to look at reality by any stretch. There's countless ways to look at reality. But there are sort of some kind of consensus, if you will, almost assumptions that we hold about the nature of things like time and space and cause and effect. I mean, nobody really questions those things, except maybe some physicists who are like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here? Maybe there's no cause and effect. I just read this quote not too long ago from a very well-known, I think he might be a Nobel Prize winning physicist, who basically said like time and space are out the window. So what are we talking about? He said. Very good question. One second here, just gonna mute you guys. Thanks. And if you do end up speaking as we go along, if you would be so kind as to mute yourself after you finish speaking, that would be great. Thank you. So here's a little piece that I wrote, and then we'll see what unfolds from there. When we look out upon the sea and behold all the many forms that we call waves, right? That's what we see when we look at an ocean. We see waves, among other things. But human consciousness, looks at all these apparent pieces of the sea and attempts to describe those. Some of the waves appear larger than others, some more ferocious than others, some choppier than others, some higher, some lower, some gentler, some rougher, and on and on and on it goes, right? When it comes to describing the waves that we're perceiving. This, what I'm describing about the sea, is really very much what our lives are like. Our lives being the flow of our experience. There is nothing else but the flow of our experience. What else is there? This is our life, the flow of our experience. So some of the waves of experience we experience, or we would describe as calmer, some we would say are more agitated, some are harder, some are easier, some are more positive and pleasant, some are more difficult and painful, and maybe we would even call them negative. We have this kind of hierarchy of the waves of experience, don't we? And from that perspective of how we are describing the waves of experience, seeing what appear to be separate waves, and then defining those waves in the ways that we do, we basically end up in the situation most humans find themselves in, which is we seek to experience more of the waves we describe as calmer, easier, pleasant, better, positive, right? And less of the other ones. totally understandable. But when it comes to realizing the fulfillment, the joy, the meaningfulness, and so on, the love that we seem to be seeking as humans, there's another option than that conventional approach that human beings tend to take to finding what it is we're looking to find in life. And that is to recognize this one single sea, if you will, that makes all these apparently different waves, these apparently distinct phenomena that we could describe as the waves of our experience, the waves of life, the circumstantial waves, experiential waves. The poet Rumi wrote, "Out beyond ideas of right and wrong, there is a field where I will meet you. When the soul lays down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about." While there's many ways we might interpret those words, I believe, my sense is that what Rumi is pointing to here is the possibility of discovering a reality that transcends all of our descriptions of right and wrong, positive and negative, pleasurable, painful. Mind you, this transcendental reality doesn't deny or push away all the seeming differences between one wave and the next. This transcendental sea, you could say the basis of all the waves, simply reveals another dimension, a deeper, more fundamental reality that underlies all the waves, no matter how we might be describing those waves. And this is really the essence of what my work is about. And how do we discover this transcendental dimension? This world that is too full to talk about, as Rumi said. Too full to talk about. In other words, it's beyond full. It's completely all-fulfilling, this world. And there's nothing to really ultimately say about it. How do we discover this? How do we discover this, the sea that is giving rise to all these waves of experience? Put another way, how do we discover what every wave is made of? What is its fundamental nature? Whether we label the waves as positive or negative, happy or sad, pleasurable or painful, calm or agitated, the inquiry that I invite people into is this: what are these waves of experience composed of? This is a really, I know I say it all the time, but I don't know myself, I never tire of even saying those words. What is experience made of? Because it's basically the answer to the question is unanswerable, which turns out to be the answer. You can't quite say what everything is made of, which is quite something to discover. And actually, I would suggest easy to discover, because just look and you'll begin to see the way in which even the simplest of experiences are impossible to comprehend what they are in their entirety, because there's too much there. So what are all these waves of experience composed of? The simple answer is they're all made of life, right? Everything is made of life, or you could say everything is made of existence. I mean, what else are things made of but life? I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Everything's made of life. Everything is life. We could say it's the energy of existence, the life force, which of course is, again, not comprehensible what life force even is, but it can be useful to reduce all the seeming differences of the different waves: pleasure, pain, sorrow, joy, and all the different forms it also takes: humans, creatures, trees, flowers, clouds, sky. Everything is made of the energy of existence. Yes, the energy can assume many forms, right? Sometimes pleasurable, sometimes painful. But if we investigate any experiential wave, feeling, and that's like the operative word here, feeling into what it is. The investigation is not an intellectual one, like what is the wave made of, like trying to analyze its parts. Feel its parts, what makes up this experience. feeling into what the wave is and not assuming that because we have language to describe it, seemingly, and as a function of that language, we imagine that we know what it is. In spite of that, we can discover that every moment is ultimately beyond description, beyond definition. Why? Well, because it is. It just is beyond description. Oh, we could say, if I had to explain it, we could say it's because it's infinite. And, look at the word there. Infinite suggests that it has no definition, right? The definitions of things put a limit around things, don't they? But everything is unlimited because it's made of infinity. Yes, the different waves appear to be definable. And this is the rub. It sure seems like we can define things, right? Like the wave we call joy is not the same as the one we call sadness. Obviously, I'd be silly to suggest otherwise. It's quite clear, right, that joy is not sadness. And yet, delve deeper beyond the conventional descriptions and labels. And what can be discovered is how ultimately ungraspable and inconceivable and unknowable every wave is. Every wave. Despite all our words and concepts, the truth is that we can never quite succeed at pinning down what experience is. And this turns out to be the most liberating discovery. The great mystic Krishnamurti captured it beautifully in the title of one of his books, Freedom from the Known. This is what he was referring to, the discovery that the things we experience in life, while seemingly definable and distinctive waves, are ultimately made of the same thing, one sea appearing as many waves, the water of life itself, the water that is ultimately beyond any and all ideas we might have about it. And in seeing and feeling the way in which every wave-like experience is in its basis, transcends what we think it is, we discover a profound well-being. A well-being rooted in the recognition that we are ultimately free of all the problematic implications that our language and descriptions so often suggest. Sometimes the waves that visit us feel quite pleasurable and sometimes not so much. And from this perspective, the way we conventionally describe phenomena, it's of course natural to seek out the wave-like experiences and circumstances we find more enjoyable and try to minimize the ones we don't like as much. I certainly do that in my own life. But when we touch the mysterious, unfathomable water that every wave is made of, we discover another kind of well-being. A well-being that can't be taken away. A well-being which, unlike the ever-changing, unpredictable, uncontrollable waves of experience, doesn't come and go. For it is the very sea of life that gives rise to every temporary wave. Ordinarily, there's a concept in the Buddhist tradition of emptiness, which I don't use that word very often. It's more like a fullness, really, but that's okay. It has a lot of technical meanings in Buddhism, but I'm not a Buddhist, so I'm not going to attempt to explain what that tradition says about it. But the basic idea is that waves, that no phenomena has independent existence. It doesn't have autonomy. It's and again, we can return to the sea metaphor. We could look at the waves and imagine they have their own kind of autonomy. There's that individual wave and it's distinct from that wave over there, right? And from a certain perspective, from within a certain framework, that's true. We could make a distinction. See that wave over there? That's really different than that wave over there, right? They're different. They have an independent existence, and I can compare that and describe it. There's this and there's that. But from the perspective of the sea, I can do no such thing, actually. There are no waves. There's just a sea. Our calling something a wave is a kind of partialization of what is ultimately a wholeness that has no, I mean, just if you look at, think about how arbitrary this actually is. If you're looking out at the sea and you see what you call a wave rising up out of the sea, do you see what I mean by partialization? It's like, is there actually a line where the wave begins and the sea ends? Like, where is that exactly? There's not, it's an arbitrary line we're drawing around the wave. Like, what part of it is a wave that's not the rest of the sea? Do you see what I mean? It's like drawing a circle around the wave. Like, there it is. You have your photograph of the wave and somebody says, what's a wave? And you draw a circle around the wave to illustrate, there's the wave, you see it? It's the part that's coming up out of the ocean. But what does that mean? It's like, no, there's just an ocean. There's no wave there. I mean, again, from one perspective, we can draw a line around it and go, there's the wave. I can draw a line around you and go, there you are. But I'm pulling you out of the context of the whole and drawing a circle around you and saying, there you are. There's Monica, there's Kira, there's Ed, there's John, drawing a circle, right? But there's not any line there. I mean, and this can sound abstract again and philosophical, and it is definitely not. It's our actual experience. Your experience is seamless. Just feel your experience right now. There's no pieces. Are there pieces to your experience? The sea of your experience. Very much wave-like, isn't it? Wow, things rising up and falling back in, and very dynamic and sparkly sometimes, like the sea can be, maybe foreboding like the sea can sometimes feel, maybe very calm, maybe just lots of turmoil in the sea. But however we might be describing the sea and all the seeming pieces that make up the sea of experience, it's like it's a complete whole. There are no parts or pieces from this perspective that I'm speaking about. And feel that for a moment. Just feel that. I was talking about questioning cause and effect, the consensus view of that, right? So again, let's look out upon the imaginary sea. Imagine a sea there, and there's like one wave. You're calling, there's a wave, and that wave's having an effect on another wave. It's causing something to happen. It's the causal thing, and then it has an effect on some other wave. Like it crashes into that other wave. Cause effect, right? But from the perspective of a single sea and a single expanse without any actual separate autonomous waves, there's no cause effect, is there? Or you could say the cause is the effect, because it's one thing. It's just one thing. You could say causing itself, but that's like meaningless. Life causing itself. What does that mean? It's just life being itself. One of the implications of, if you don't already have a sense of this, just exploring it, is that one of the implications of this, you could say just pragmatic implications of this, is that this wholeness, the word healing is rooted in the idea of the whole. They have similar etymology, and this wholeness is all nourishing and all fulfilling, and completely. You see, because there's not something outside of the wholeness affecting the wholeness. It's complete ease, and it's complete well-being, and it's complete stability. It's complete, the peace that passeth understanding, as it says in the Bible. It's beyond comprehension, because there's what the comprehension says is there's one thing pushing against another. There's this push-pull between one phenomena and another. So we imagine ourselves, right, as separate waves having experiences that are other separate waves that are affecting us. That's the ordinary human kind of condition. And then we're trying to rearrange all the waves of experience and circumstance in order to be okay, to feel secure, to feel happy. But there's a way, a very real way, in which that whole project is doomed to fail. And we may have already discovered that in our lives. I mean, yes, we can temporarily, it's not to say we can't sort of, it seems as if we can bring into our lives circumstances and experiences and so on, and people, places, and things that we find resonant with who we are and what we love and value, of course. But again, I'm talking, that's like one order of well-being, which is great. And then there's this other order of well-being where the whole project is completely not necessary, because a well-being is already established as the fundamental basis of everything, just as it is. The whole is completely, what they say in Tibetan tradition, naturally perfect as it is, because there's nothing else. There's nothing else but the whole. It has no opposite. There's no opposite to the totality, because any apparent opposite to it is the totality. So there's just the totality. There's just the sea of existence. There's just this singularity that shows up as all this seeming differentiation, which is quite astonishing and amazingly amazing and beautiful and sometimes horrifying, seemingly horrifying. But see, from the perspective of the sea, the wholeness, again, let it be a felt sense of that right now. From the perspective of this wholeness that has no lines, no gaps anywhere, no seams, it's complete, totally unobstructed, nothing in the way of anything else, because there's no things. There's no things. From the perspective of that wholeness, no apparent wave that might arise experientially can represent either a harm or a benefit, actually. Because the ocean is not affected by its waves. The waves are the ocean. They're the expression of the ocean. And that changes the whole ballgame when it comes to our human search for well-being. When we start to get a sense of and a taste of that the sheer existence of every instant is pure, unconditioned stability and well-being. I wanted to do one little kind of brief sort of exploration with you, and then we'll kind of open it up for some conversation if anyone feels moved to talk about any of this with me. The other thing I was reflecting on as I sat out looking over the sea yesterday that really was striking me was how it's dynamism, how this body of water, just like the body of the watery nature of this moment, is it's completely unstable. And boy, do we seem to, as humans, kind of resist the instability of this, don't we? Like, we wish we could get a handle on it, like hold it in place, fix it, like hold it, like here it is. I got a grasp of it now, right? Whatever that might look like, the grasp of an understanding, or the grasp of an insight, or the grasp of a pleasurable moment, right? Or a person, like if I could just kind of hold on to it. But if you feel, again, experience, you can quickly see how impossible it is. Just feel experience right now, and notice how unbelievably unstable it is. It's just completely shifting. Every instant, it's changing, isn't it? It's a complete cosmic shapeshifter, our experience. It is not holding still, is it? You feel that? You feel the constant movement of it, the constant dynamism of it? I mean, every single thing that you've experienced in the last half hour is all gone. It's absolutely vanished. What stability? What's staying still and remaining? There is not anything staying still and remaining. There's this constant melting away of everything in the instant. It's a funny thing. You know, I spent decades trying to meditate and trying to get my mind to become stable. And I wondered why that seemed to produce so much suffering in me. I was like, I'm meditating to feel better. You know, it's not working. That's because I was trying to make something hold still, and it doesn't want to hold still. It's not its nature, it would seem. I actually think the notion in meditation of some kind of stability is actually a fantasy, a kind of contrivance that seems to, like, it seems like it kind of holds still. I'm focused. Everything's kind of calmed down. Boom, I'm like there, you know, I'm not moving. It's actually a fantasy. Just feel your experience. It's not actually holding still because it's alive. It's not static. So here's a cool thing, though, is that we can actually find the stability that we're looking for and the security that we're looking for. And where do we find it? We find it right here in this instability. That's where it is. It's right here in reality. That's what's stable. That's the ground. The ground is that there is no ground because it keeps getting pulled away. And yet that turns out to be, in this gorgeously paradoxical way, unbelievable ground of stability. In a sense, and this is again quite paradoxical, all of this dynamism, you know, again, look at the sea. The sea is constantly taking a different shape and form, isn't it? It always looks different. It's never holding still, which is why we can't really define it as a sea anyway, because, well, which sea? The one that just happened a second ago or the next one? It's not one thing. It's many things, isn't it? It's constantly changing. This moment, like the sea, is constantly, the sea of this moment is on the move, isn't it? Sometimes very subtly, you know, barely perceptibly, maybe. It seems like it's so quiet and placid. But no, it's still percolating and scintillating and vibrating, right? But despite the sea of the moment always appearing differently, always showing up differently, all that instability, what's really amazing is that the sea always remains the sea, doesn't it? Life continues to be life. Existence continues to be existence. Reality continues to be reality. Or if you want to put it in theological terms, God continues to be God. No matter how it's looking, it's still the ground of being, the ground of existence. So it's completely stable. It never leaves itself. What more could you ever hope for as far as stability? It never goes anywhere. It never disappears. Even though it's constantly disappearing, it never actually disappears, because the disappearance of this moment is the appearance of, you could say, the next instant, isn't it? I mean, that's the continuity. Something's always here, isn't it? You can feel that. Just feel how something's always here. It's like relentless, like a drone. You know, the hum of being, it's always here. And yet, it's not really a drone because it has melody to it. It has change to it. It's always singing a different song. So in a sense, it's droning on and on, being, existing, existing, existing. And yet it's really singing constantly a different song. but the music's always playing. That's the constancy, that's the stability. The music of life is always playing, even though it always sounds different. Well, I like that song better than that song. Fair enough. We have our preferences as humans. But this other order of well-being is found in the singing itself, in the song itself, in the music itself. The fact that the music is playing, the fact that the sound of reality is sounding. Not how it sounds, but the fact that it's making sound. Because that's life. That's the miracle of existence. This is the miracle right now. And you don't have to go anywhere to find it, because no experience is going to bring you closer to it. You don't have to go on a Zoom call like this to be closer to it, because you were just as close to it before the Zoom call as you are now, and as you will be when the Zoom call ends. You can't get any closer to it. Even if meetings like this can hopefully remind us of that fact, point that fact out, and then hopefully illuminate the truth, if you will, that it doesn't depend on any circumstances or experiences, because it is all circumstances and experiences. That makes sense? It doesn't depend on how it looks. So that's why I always say my 3 favorite words, this is it. This is what you're looking for. This. There's no greener grass on the other side, because there is no other side. There's only this. And the grass doesn't get any greener. Well, I'd love to just open it up for anyone who would like to explore anything or around all of this. I appreciate, somewhat unique perspective that I'm inviting us to investigate.
One way of talking about experience is a foreground and a background.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're pointing out is collapsing the foreground and the background into a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Foreground and background are just abstractions, aren't they? I mean, we could say that what's in the foreground might be whatever is being seemingly featured in awareness or in our attention, right? And that which is being less featured is kind of recedes into the background. But that's that's a fuzzy line between what's foreground and what's background, isn't it? Fuzzy to the point of not actually existing. But yes, certain phenomena can come more to the fore experientially, right? Like now this conversation feels like it's more in the fore, and yet the context, if you will, within which the conversation is occurring, the field of experience, that contextual field of experience hasn't disappeared either. It's just maybe not being as featured. It's the peculiar kind of miraculous, mysterious thing we call the focus of attention, that it seems to highlight certain features of the field. But again, it's somewhat arbitrary in the way that it does it, even though it does it. Nevertheless, it goes, wow, look at that wave. Look at that tidal wave that's about to overwhelm me. And meanwhile, there's actually the whole rest of the sea.
Yeah, the other thought is every concept, like a cup, is really defined as here's the cup, and it's not everything else.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's the sort of the sneaky hiding of the not everything else that fools us into thinking we know what we're talking about.
Right.
But everything else is always included in every definition.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what we've done is we've that's what our definitions do. Excuse me. They seem to define the limits of that phenomena, both perceptually and experientially, right? So we place a limit around it. We define it, don't we? We limit it. We say it's this and it's not that. But what's so amazing to explore is to investigate your actual experience of any seemingly limited phenomena, whether it's appearing out as what you would call in the outer world or the inner world. Those are also arbitrary distinctions, as it turns out, because it's all the field of experience. But putting that aside, investigate the seemingly limited, and you will arrive at what is ultimately does not have a limit. You don't get to if you define like some state like sadness, you've placed a limit around it. That's the definition, right? Well, investigate what it is. Where are the edges of sadness? And where do you get to the end of sadness and the rest of the world begin, for example? I mean, at every point, whether again you explore the phenomena experientially, not so much analytically, and you arrive at the unlimited. You don't find the limit, actually, which is really wild. Because everything about, you could say, sort of consensus human reality suggests definitions and limits and objects and phenomenal things that, again, have autonomous existence, i.e., are defined, have a boundary around them. But that's the invitation here, is to look and see if you can find the boundary. What's interesting and trippy and, I don't know, astonishing to me is that even when you explore experience and phenomena and discover their boundless, limitless nature, their indefinite nature, in a sense, their indeterminate nature, it doesn't make them go away necessarily. You could explore what we call the individual self and find that you can't find a line there, right, where does ed come to an end and then the rest of existence begin, right? You can't find that line. It's not discrete. And so in a sense you could look and see like that's the complete dissolution of ed, and all there is a sea of existence. Like, you don't have autonomous existence. You're not a phenomena that exists autonomously from the basic state, you could say, of everything. And neither am I, neither is anything. And yet, despite seeing that and recognizing that and having that start to inform your existence, you don't necessarily lose access to the experience of the other perspective, which is being an individual, living a life that's distinct from other individuals. So again, it's quite a wild sort of paradoxical dance of kind of seemingly contradictory realities that are actually the same reality. Just perspectives. One perspective, there's a wave. Other perspective, there's just a sea. With no edges to anything. It turns out sorry, just one last thing. It turns out that perspective, and why I emphasize it, is that it is the wellspring of everything that we're looking for. It can be found in that singular whole, because it's the end of searching for something else. It's the end of opposed frameworks. It's the end of seeking well-being by securing certain phenomena, because you see there aren't phenomena to secure and no need to secure them or keep certain phenomena away, because phenomena don't represent a threat, actually. Not from that perspective. From the perspective of being an individuated wave, yeah, the Mack truck represents a phenomena that could be uncomfortable if it hits me. So I don't deny that perspective. But from the, you could say, cosmic perspective, there's no humans and there's no Mack trucks. There's just a display of inconceivable, God knows what. I mean, you could call it a light show. Sorry, you were going to say something else, Ed.
Yeah, can you hold both perspectives at the same time, or do you alternate?
I would say that in my own experience, there's an increasing relaxation of any effort to hold any perspective in place, or to privilege one perspective over another, because even the perspective of seeming separation is well, it's not, because it's not actually because it's not actually an independent phenomena either, then there's nothing that's ever can be lost, nor anyone who could ever lose it. In one of the sutras, Buddha says, by incomparable enlightenment, I attained not even the least thing. That's what he's talking about. Or when Longchenpa, the Tibetan teacher, says, there's no difference between recognizing the basic state and not recognizing it. To the human, from the human-centric perspective, there's definitely a difference. One feels all nourishing and all fulfilling, and the other can sometimes feel like hell. So yeah. But from the perspective of the ocean, there's no difference. Doesn't matter how it looks.
Well, from the perspective of the ocean, there are no perspectives.
There are no perspectives, and there's every perspective. Because the ocean, if we stay with that metaphor, we call it reality or God or whatever, it's showing up as all these perspectives. Those are its, that's almost its favorite pastime, is taking on perspectives, clearly. All the time it's happening. Right? It's kind of funny. But it's like it's doing that. I don't know how to take a perspective. I don't know how to define things. Consciousness is doing that, or life is doing that. The intelligence, the innate intelligence. I mean, I close my eyes and I open my eyes, and all the objects that I call objects appear perfectly as discrete objects, seemingly definable. I don't know how to do that. That's the magic show. But it seems like that reality itself can also recognize that it's doing that, and in a sense wake up to realize that that's not the only perspective, that there is, in a sense, the perspectiveless perspective, as you were saying, that recognizes that no perspective can hold this because it's not holdable. It's too, can't, like the mystery is a universe unto itself. It can't ever get to the bottom of itself because it has no bottom. It's fathomless. It's infinite. And for sure, again, from the human perspective, if you will, like recognizing the fathomless nature of this liberates us from all the seeming implications of all the knowledge that we seem to have accumulated about things, and how those things could represent potential threats or potential benefits. And then we search for those. And if we find them, great. If not, oh shit, now what am I going to do? It's like all of that whole game that we play. It's like, it's exhausting and not necessary, actually.
Hello, John.
Hi, Brad.
Hi, I don't really know this. It's my first time joining you. I don't know the etiquette.
Brad, hi. For some reason, your sound was breaking up there. I don't know if it's a signal on your end or if there's anything you can do, but I could barely make out what you were saying. Sorry about that. Maybe your earbuds. Yeah.
Is this any better?
That's perfect. Thank you. Yeah, you sound fine,
I don't know
Brad.
if you can.
Yeah, you sound fine.
I'll try again in later if you can't hear me.
Brad, I can
Sorry.
hear actually I can hear you, but I don't think you're hearing me. We can hear you fine, and you sound great now. I guess you're not hearing me. I'll put a chat in. Maybe you'll see the chat. Oh,
Sorry, John. I don't know if you'll be able to hear me or not. So
I can hear you great, Brad. Can you hear me? For some reason, you can't hear me.
Can you hear me, Brad?
I don't think he can hear now that he changed his earbuds, maybe.
yes, I don't know. I can't seem to hear anyone. I'm sorry, John. I'll either log back in or try something else.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, you bet. Looks like Brad's trying to log back in. We'll see if it works this time. Brad, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Good job.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for your patience. I
Of course.
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I was excited just to check in. You probably don't, we met many years ago through a common friend, Kevin Barrows. But
Oh yeah, yeah.
um, yeah. So of these different states that you're describing are, I think, familiar to me.
Hmm.
I spend a fair amount of time moving in and out of wave, ocean, and there's also states where there's not wave or ocean. There's actually nothing at all, a kind of non-existence that permeates everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my interest in talking to you is less about the states
Mm-hmm.
and the view of reality than it is about a different kind of stability. You were talking about how there's a dynamism, which I also am familiar with, a kind of arising in every moment of reality.
Right.
But what I noticed for myself is the question of freedom is actually more of a question for me,
Yeah.
in that at times there's a freedom of movement between all of these different views of reality. And sometimes, as Ed was referencing, sometimes they're often experienced more than one, like the forms and the non-existence and such.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also plenty of time when I land in a very constricted experience of my old egoic self.
Right.
And then there it feels very tight and unpleasant, and it's very dead-ended in that I no longer can hear, you used the music metaphor of
Mm-hmm.
so in, I go and suddenly all I can hear is songs that I like and songs that I don't like, and I don't seem to be able to find the
Mm-hmm.
general quality of music in the experience,
Yeah.
that fullness, that richness.
Yeah.
And so my sense is that you have you seem to be fairly stable in the experience of the music being available to you as a possible experience. I'm very clear that the music is there. It's not that I ever have any doubt anymore. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's quite clear to me. I
Mm-hmm.
know I know it that's in that way let's say what I am and what reality is,
Mm-hmm.
but yet I find myself quite dead-ended and stuck at times in unpleasant ways that have negative impacts on my family life and my work
Sure.
life and my
Yeah.
sense of self. So I wonder what you have to say about that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's several things I could say, but one is that to whatever extent you find that there is this opportunity, I think that there is always a potential opportunity in those moments that you're describing as in the ways that you did of constricted, whatever, to explore what's actually there. because this is the trick of the defining the aspect of consciousness that is rendering, that's attempting to put a framework around what's here. And essentially, when there's a moment occurring that we would describe as now a sense of constriction and feeling caught again and stuck again and not freed and not accessing these deeper whatever realities I know are there, it's like, can you see the way in which that's all more rendering of something, right? Because that is actually what it is. What is here is in its basis, in its fundamental basis, not renderable, because it is not any experience from the most blissful to the most horrifying that we would describe in those ways, and everything in between. It absolutely doesn't collapse into any of those interpretive frameworks. Even though it seems like we're able to, this is the tricky thing, because it seems like, because of the power of consciousness to seem to pin down phenomena and describe them in such a way that you could then tell me about this phenomena that you're wondering about, and you're wondering how to extricate yourself from, and go get back to another whatever. I'm not saying it correctly the way you said it, but you know what I mean? It's like those, there's an opportunity to look and see if, in fact, even in those moments of tightness and constriction and identification or whatever, if anything has actually disappeared, if the fundamental basis of it all has gone anywhere, because it hasn't gone anywhere. Because the sea that's giving rise to that particular wave that we might describe as whatever, tension or agitation or identification, is still, in other words, the sea is not conditioned on how, I was saying this earlier, it's not conditioned on how it looks. And so there's an opportunity in those moments to explore the nature of those states, and something can be discovered that they don't actually, there is no problem there, actually. There is not anything there, actually. It just looks like there is. And sometimes it can be pretty fucking convincing that there's something there, for sure. That's the power of the magic show, is like, it's, I call it the mirage-like nature of things. Like, yes, and it's paradoxical, because in a sense, there is something there that you're calling contraction. Like, it's there, it's an actuality, but it's paradoxical because it's there, but unfindable, which is really wild. Go to look for what contraction is. I mean, what is contraction? A feeling, a felt sense, who knows what, Go to find it, and you will come up empty-handed every time. And the unfinding of it is the discovery of the freedom. You were talking about freedom, that it's complete freedom. Everything is complete freedom. There's nothing but complete freedom, unbounded. And sometimes it might be experienced and described as anything but that. But that's our tendency to imagine that freedom looks a certain way. Freedom looks like everything. It looks like whatever it looks like. It looks like this. And that's very contrary to how we typically think about life. But it certainly sounds like you know exactly what I'm talking about, in a sense. I mean, you have access to what I'm describing in your own experience. And maybe, I don't know if this is helpful, but kind of a reminder that what you've discovered is not a state. It's the ground and basis of every state. And so even the states that you might find uncomfortable or imagine to be somehow represent the absence of something more fundamental are never the absence of anything fundamental, because there's only the most fundamental. There's only the basic state. There isn't anything else. There's only one reality.
But how is it that there's such an exquisite clarity? I mean, even now, sitting here talking with you,
Yeah.
there's a knowing of what I am that is beyond time and space, that is beyond, that simply exists in the now, and that encompasses either everything or absolutely nothing. And yet a moment, at another moment later today, I'll be dealing with my child and will be, how does that become not available? How does that become not known again? It's before, earlier when I was doing meditation and Buddhist practice and such,
Mm,
I understood how things came and went because I'd never had the fullness
mhm.
of the experience of reality that was sustained,
Yeah.
that allowed me to actually know myself to be that,
Mhm,
and to walk around as that in the world. But
mhm.
after that, it's still puzzling to me. How can something like that, it's like, how can you not see an elephant in the room? How can you, it's just very puzzling to me, John.
I know
You,
exactly what you're
you
talking about. It is, you could say it is puzzling. It is puzzling that reality can miss itself, can seemingly lose sight of itself. When it's the only thing, I mean, how is that possible?
yeah,
And yet we could say that that's its almost favorite mode, to miss itself. It's doing it all the time, seemingly. And my sense is that the more we explore what we're exploring here, and come to see again and again and again that there's something that is not coming and going, and that's not like some awareness over here that's not coming and going. That's what's not coming and going is reality. It doesn't come and go, and yet it shows up as all comings and goings. So the shift, I think, that happens for us, it can happen along the way, if I make this into sort of some path of unfolding, which I'm always hesitant to do, but I'll do it now
I hear
anyway.
that.
um, because it's funny, because it's like I have to introduce a timeline, and it's, why would I introduce a timeline when all the action is here? But putting that aside, we'll play with the timeline for a moment. It's like, it seems like, oh, I'll just say from my own experience, is there's an increasing, and it continues to be this way, sense of kind of a kind of knowing that's just that this, there's no losing this, no matter what might be happening and being described in whatever ways it's being described. That it's just not that I'm always home, you know. That a moment of intense identification and longing and feeling like I'm missing something is God. And the more that's seen, the more we're kind of bulletproof, you could say, because there's no exiting or entering, right? So I think part of what you're describing is just a return to kind of a familiar human habit of imagining that there's phenomena with independent existence, basically. Or
Yes.
there's some phenomena that escape the sea and they become something other than the sea. That's the, if there's one spiritual problem or human problem, it's imagining that there's some phenomena that are not the ground of perfect and profound freedom and well-being, and that's just not true. And I think you know that, and have seen that profoundly, and it's just a matter of, it's sort of like reality just keeps giving us opportunities to see that again and again and again, in a sense. I mean, I sometimes say this, that back in around 2001 or so, I would say I had kind of a seminal moment of where something went in that just had not occurred before, in terms of seeing like, wow, everything is it, everything is it. Everything that I'm looking for is everything. And And I would say, you know, you can see it in the books that I've written too. It's like a process of like integrating that everything means everything. It really means everything. On the ground, sobbing. Yep, that too. And that, can you feel the way that's so liberating to feel like there's just no escaping it? And it doesn't, at least in my own experience, it doesn't mean like I have lost preferences for certain states or experiences, because that's not true. I find this incredibly pleasurable to speak with all of you about this. I mean, it's so joyful. And I prefer it over other sorts of things that, you know, whatever those might be. But fundamentally, I know that they're the same. But I still prefer, you know, certain things. So I don't know why, but I just do. I love your question and appreciate it. And I hope shed maybe a little bit of light on aspects of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad.
Well, John.
Hey,
this is
Michael.
Michael. Good morning. Great to hear you. So along the previous gentleman, his name Brad?
Yeah.
You know, along the same line as Brad's inquiry, the avidya, the not knowing.
The not knowing, yeah.
The not knowing. That is, it sometimes seems so insidious and so, I guess, it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
One can be feeling calm and connected, just resting in presence,
Right.
and then it can turn on a dime, and all of a sudden there's all the whatever version of conflict and pain and
Right.
general dukkha,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a certain I don't know. I mean, it's very dynamic. It's very very intense. It's very. It's not lukewarm. It has power. That I'm exploring that now in my own process. And I think it has its own. It's the force of nature. It's following its own. It's not within the domain of volition. It's just happening.
It definitely seems that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. And I mean, your question and Brad's question is in a certain way the question, you know, which is like, because you know, this is what we do. We basically imagine that this isn't it, you know. And that imagination has everything to do with definition and reification and imagining based on, we think we've pulled it off. We think we've resolved what this is, or consciousness imagines that, oh yeah, I've got it. I know what this is. And I've just described it as dukkha. That's the dukkha, is imagining that there is dukkha.
It's not. I mean, it has an emotional, raw feeling aspect of it. It's like,
I'm not going to deny for 1 second that there's, like I said earlier, you know, sadness. I'm not going to deny that sadness is the same as joy. So it has a flavor, right? It has a texture. When Brad was talking about contraction, it's got a flavor and a texture to it. The experience of contraction that's very different than relaxation and complete open-endedness, right? No question about it. Qualitatively distinct, right?
Yes.
And that is at the level of the description of it. You could say at the level of the experience of it, but there's this opportunity, as you know, because, you know, we've talked a lot and you've explored, you know, in Peter's work as well, that we have an opportunity, as I was saying to Brad, is like in any moment where we feel as if we've lost touch with something more fundamental, and we like lost the plot line, and we're like, right, we're confused, we're suffering, whatever. There is this opportunity to come back to what we could say the immediacy of concrete experiencing, what's concretely present. And there's a lot of different aspects to this that can undercut the belief in that something is wrong, and or that there is even something there. And one of the most powerful ways to undercut that, I know you've also explored this a lot, Michael, is that I know you came on a little bit late, but I was just doing a little guided thing towards the beginning about how unstable this is. And if you feel there's a moment of contraction, say Brad was describing as contraction or identification. Okay, well, that's an idea. Feel what's actually present. Feel it in the immediacy. Feel what's here right now. And it has no continuity. It is unstable. And in that instability, that is one of the doorways into emptiness, because things are not stable. They're not things. They're not definable. How do you find something that's unstable? Well, you can't. Period. There is no way to define this moment, because the moment's gone. That's how unstable it is. That's not philosophy. It's actuality. And discovering that just by feeling what's here, coming back to the reality of the actuality of what's present here experientially, and just notice how it's a shapeshifter. And that is liberating, because it liberates us from this implication of things having thingness, which requires a certain kind of stability and continuity. How can it, the self, I mean, it has to have stability to be a self, to be a thing. I mean, if it's constantly changing shape, then what's the self? Well, I mean, for example, or any other phenomenon, I don't have to pick the self, but if what we are changes every instant, how do we define what we are? Well, we don't. We can't. And this is true of every single phenomena. So that's just one trick of sorts to bring us back to the non-reified sort of understanding, which is, and it may not equate with not continuing to feel some degree of discomfort or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's like I can have intense physical pain, let's say, and I can explore the nature of that pain and discover that it's not a thing either. It has no continuity. It has no independent existence from the ground of being, right? It doesn't. And yet it may still hurt like hell. You know what I mean? It's like, so that's a just sort of a peculiar aspect of, you could say, the way reality can be experienced. It's kind of we can taste the different flavors, and some of them are more pleasant than others. But the real like, we can't put our stock in our search for well-being and fulfillment and happiness and all of this freedom and that we're seeking as humans. We can't put our stock in that which is not a thing. That's just a losing proposition. But we can put our stock in what's actually here, which is not a thing. Which is not a thing, and yet it shows up as everything.
Okay, so John, let's explore this a little bit further.
Sure.
The two principles, the nature of mind and radiant presence, whatever you want to call it, unconditioned nature of consciousness, and then everything that would subjectively in one's experience present something other than that, some type of limitation, some type of confinement.
We imagine some phenomena departs from that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I certainly wish I could just abide in radiant presence, unconditioned consciousness, without any interference, but that's not happening. Still, all these disturbing thoughts and the range of afflictive feelings. I'm not spared. You name it, it arises in my mind. And so when you say it's like an ice, like if you put an ice cube in warm water, eventually it will melt and it will dissolve into the water. Is it like, would that be a useful model that these rigidified patterns will eventually dissolve in the light of radiant presence.
Well, I wouldn't quite put it that way. I would say that the spiritual practice that I'm sharing is to look and see what the patterns are apparently made of and discover that they're already dissolved in light. There's not something to happen. In other words, if again, come back to the sea metaphor that we started with at the outset of this morning, there's this wave that's rising up experientially. And it's like, we imagine it's a problem, it's a threat, I don't like how it feels. What can I do to make it become the ocean? It is the ocean. There's not anything to do. And this is why one of the central practices, and I also share it, I don't necessarily emphasize, or I haven't been emphasizing it lately in these calls, but of making no effort to micromanage the flow of experience, because just allow experience to be as it is. Why is that such a powerful practice? It's unthinkably powerful. Well, one of the reasons it is so powerful is that it can kind of cut the cord of our habit of believing that we have to fix phenomena, that phenomena are actually phenomena. So in other words, if we're trying to do something about whatever it is, you describe various things that visit you, difficult states. The minute we go into trying to do something about them, we are reinforcing thingness. We're reinforcing independent existence of those things. And I think, I also said this earlier, that we constantly fail at that, more or less. And because we're grasping at something that's not there. So we're trying to manipulate our states of mind. And yet, this, this from Dzogchen, right? I mean, the self-release,
That is
right? Phenomena self-release upon arising, period. Not because we do something to release them. Their nature is to let go of themselves in every instant. That's the liberating nature of the instability, is that, wow, what an incredible thing that every moment life lets go of everything and starts new. I mean, literally, everything is gone. All of it is let go of right now. All of it, your entire past, gone. And there's this fresh moment. That's actuality. And reality is the master at letting go of everything, of not holding on, because its nature is it can't hold on, because its nature is fluid, right? So there's no hold on. So what? It's already gone. So it's like there's nothing to accept or reject. There's nothing, the whole notion of like grasping and aversion, it's like there's not anything there to grasp or have aversion to, actually. Nor is there actually someone there separate from everything that's arising who could grasp or have aversion. That's just a fantasy of consciousness, and it's a powerful one. Don't get me wrong. I know it as well as any of you. But look at the one you were talking about, abiding. And it's very easy to hear things about abiding in this and staying in this, staying put in this. And it's like, this abides in itself. This is itself. The ocean, we're not someone who learns to abide in the ocean of existence. We are the ocean of existence, period. Abidance is the nature of things. The ocean abides in and as itself. There is only the ocean of existence abiding in itself forever and ever and ever. And that's what we are.
John, what you said a moment ago, it was very in line with my Dzogchen teacher Geshe Namgyal's often given advice, or his take on meditation. From a classical Dzogchen point of view, any effort, any intention to alter what is moving away from what is.
Right.
That's why Dzogchen is traditionally distinct. Say in Buddhism,
right.
It was something really well, from a Nyingma point of view, it was considered the pinnacle. But generally in Buddhist practice, you do things, you make effort,
right.
You try and be more aware, you visualize a deity, you're modifying your actual experience through effort.
Right.
Dzogchen, as Geshe Namjal has explained it,
You're not.
there's no effort. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And again, why that's so powerful is it undercuts the whole idea that of kind of the hierarchy of experience, right? Which is like this wave is better than that wave, and I don't like this wave. So what can I do to make this wave be more like the way I would like it to be? I mean, that kind of sums it up, doesn't it? It's like whether we put those in spiritual terms, like I want this to be a more awakened, enlightened wave of momentary wave. It's like we are immediately feeding into the kind of the fundamental innocent misunderstanding, which is that some waves are not the sea. And that's why we suffer, basically, because we imagine some waves are not it, and then we try to find the ones that are it. And so we're in this process of kind of rejecting certain waves or trying to avoid certain waves and grasping hold of other waves. And all of that rests upon really kind of the belief that the waves have separate existence, which is fueled by the interpretive frameworks, right? That place boundaries around them seemingly, and look out at the sea and go, oh, there's a wave, and I like that wave, and I like the shape of that wave, and it feels better, and it's all quite understandable. Like as I said, it's like I like certain waves too. And so I get that, but then there's this other truth, if you will, that wow, it's like, I mean, I think I summed everything up today in my conversation with you about this idea of abiding, in the totality, abiding in divinity, and that divinity is divinity, and it is all things, and shines forth as all things, and shines forth as every instant. So the abidance is somewhere in the Bible. It says it's already accomplished, And that's why, again, why your teacher's emphasizing effortlessness, because it can help to illuminate that the already accomplished nature of this, that it is already abiding. If we just relax our efforts to try to abide, we'll discover that we are inseparable from all that is. What else could we possibly be? But I mean, and let yourself, when I say those words, when I speak the words that I do in these meetings, it's like there's an opportunity to kind of feel what it is that I'm saying, to feel the wave of yourself or oneself, feel your own being. And what you call your being is the beingness of everything. There's just being. There's the existence of everything, period. And yeah, it's and that just as I said earlier, it's when you feel that, when you touch that you don't have independent existence from the very ground of existence itself, that you are the universe. What else could you possibly be? I mean, the universe, if you will, the mystery of life is giving rise to all of this, and all of this is none other than the mystery of life. And I mean, feel the nourishing nature of that, the supportive nature of that. I mean, we have this term, the universe has got your back. It's like, it makes it sound like there's a person and then there's a universe behind the person that's got our back. It's like, it's not the full story. It's like it's like the universe has your back because the universe is you. It's like, it's like, what more back? It's like really got your back. Anyway, thank you for your, as always, wonderful questions. I love them.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. Sometimes, the stuff I'm talking about can sound so esoteric and highfalutin, and the really cool thing is that it's just your normalcy, what your so-called normalcy, your so-called everyday run-of-the-mill, going to the bathroom, having a cup of coffee, hanging out with your kids or your partner or your friends or doing your work. It's like that, just your life is the abiding. All of it, all of it. And the increasing kind of sense of that and knowing of that and instinctive, intuitive sense of the reality of that, that just it brings a joy, you know, it brings forth I think a kind of capacity to increasingly enjoy all the flavors that much more, no matter how the flavors are showing up. It doesn't take away from the challenges that come along as part of the human um, experience, because those are real. Old age and death. But old age and death turn out to be not merely what they appear to be either. They're also the profound ground of everything. And access to that perspective, which we have access to because here it is, that perspective's here. The feeling of this indescribability is here. It's right here. Just feel that the way in which you can encapsulate this moment with your words and your concepts. That's true of the most pleasurable moments and the most painful ones. They're not, you can't put them in a box of description. You can't fit them into the box because they're transcendental. And then being able to access that perspective makes navigating, particularly the challenging moments of existence, so much, we can just navigate them so much more harmoniously, and it just changes. It changes the way that we navigate everything, really, potentially.
I was thinking throughout the meeting, and even when you were just talking now, like there's times when, you know, you're more aware and feel, I feel that glow, and, you know, it adds a richness, oh, I can't talk, richness to like the human experience. And then feeling okay with those moments where I don't feel that glow. I'm not, you know, as in touch or aware.
Right.
But even saying that, like, it doesn't make those moments any less rich.
Right.
You know, when I'm not as aware or.
Right. And that comes right back to, you know, some of my earlier conversations, Kira, about how when we say it's not as bright, you know,
Yeah.
We are doing what we do as consciousness does. It's putting a label around it, a box around it of description of like, oh, well, this isn't quite as bright or isn't quite as aware. It's like, and there's an opportunity every time we recognize or remember to notice something. It's like, well, you know, is that actually true?
Yeah, hold on.
Hold on, exactly. Like maybe from one angle, if you will, one perspective, we make distinctions, right? Clearly. Between this and that, but I'm talking about the as you know, that the common denominator underlying all of the seeming distinctions, which is unthinkably full and bright, 1,000% all the time, with no diminishment. Yeah. And so a moment of like, you know, feeling lonely, or a moment of insecurity, or a moment of low energy, or a moment of terror, or moments that we might think of as less bright and fun and joyful than wow, recognizing like, oh my God, you know, this is amazing existence, you know, and it lights us up and we feel, it's like those other moments are, they are on both entirely distinct and yet not distinct. And where they're not distinct is in their basis. Because even like the most, like take a moment of like mundane boredom and whatever, you know, and feel what that is. Like, what's boredom? Boredom is a light show too, isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing. You know, the dream is a really powerful metaphor. My friend Peter uses it oftentimes, and I find myself using it too. That you know, in the dream, there's all this seeming distinction and differentiation, isn't there? Like, there's the terrifying dreams and the blissfully orgasmic dreams and the confusing dreams and the insight producing dreams, right? There are all these different flavors of the dream world, right? Different characters in the dreams. There seem to be all these pieces in the dream, right? And this seems to be causing that in the dream, right? And yet, what is it all? It's one thing. That's all that, it's all equal. The dream is a single expanse of dreaming. And all that differentiation is only true from within the perspective of the seeming differentiation. Because from the other perspective, it's all the dreaming. It's all the dreaming. That's the wholeness. No pieces in the dream. In the sleeping dream and in the waking dream, no pieces. We could say that the waking dream is the dream of life. Life is dreaming in the sense of, that doesn't make it any less real. It just is, well, I don't know what it is, but it's just the activity of life, you know, like, so the dreams at night are the activity of consciousness dreaming, right? We could say, that show up as all the diversity and differentiation and pleasure and pain and the whole drama of the dream world. It's the activity of the dreaming consciousness. So it's one thing appearing as many things. The the waking life's no different. It's the activity of one thing. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that one thing is. It's the activity of, I don't know. I have no idea. It's lovely to be with all of you, as always. And I'll look forward to maybe seeing you down the road another time. In the meantime, wish you a wonderful day. Thank you all.
Thanks, John.
John,
Thanks,
thank you,
folks.
John, so much.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.